shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with End Time Ministries, and I thank you for joining me on Thursday's edition of End of the Age. Man, is there so much going on in prophecy right now, so much fulfillment of prophecy. It's really hard for us to keep up with it. And I'm going to be going over something today that just happened right before I come on the air. I came running in here from hearing this speech, and many of you all may have heard it. But Donald Trump just withdrew us from the Paris Climate Agreement. Do you understand the ramifications of that and how important that is? It's extremely important because we know and understand from the prophecies of the Bible that the United States is not mentioned in the world governing body in the end time. Revelation chapter 13, the eagle's wings are not mentioned there. And so we know prophetically that that's going to happen. And what Donald Trump just did was to remove us from the Paris Climate Agreement, which is one of the main efforts in the world today to establish a world governing body, to get it so they can control all the nations of the earth and their energy use and all these different things. And the global warming climate change scam or hoax is designed to redistribute the wealth of the developed nations to the underdeveloped nations along its socialistic principles. And so it's a further move. It's the ongoing efforts to establish a world government in the earth today. The previous administration, Obama, he signed us on to it. And yet today, just before I came on the air, matter of fact, I don't think he was even done with the speech when I walked in here, Donald Trump pulled us out of that. And he claimed to do it many times on his campaign trail. And today he did it. And I'm telling you what, I'm a pretty proud American of my president today for doing that. And we don't want to be involved in the world governing body. And there are celebrities and world leaders and everybody that were coming against Trump and trying to persuade him, don't do it, don't do it. Look, you know why? You know why they're doing that? Because they don't want him to get out of the world governing body. They want the United States involved in this world government. So they were trying, those that believe in a world government and have bought into that agenda have said, don't do it. We can't have the United States get out. Please stay in with us. Donald Trump stood in the Rose Garden today at the White House and said, we're out. So Donald Trump stated during his energy speech in May of 2016, he said, we're going to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement. This is what he promised, and stop all payments of U.S. tax dollars to the United Nations global warming programs. He said President Obama entered the U.S. into the Paris Climate Accords unilaterally and without permission from the Congress. This agreement gives foreign bureaucrats control over how much of our energy and how much we use right here in America. So foreign bureaucrats are going to be controlling what we're using and what we're doing on our land and in our country. He said, no way. American energy dominance will be declared a strategic, economic, and foreign policy goal of the United States, and it's about time. Now, that's what he promised on the campaign trail. What happened today? Well, Donald Trump pulled us out, and he states this in his speech. It just happened within the last 15, 20 minutes. He said, in order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, but begin negotiations to re-enter the Paris Accord on an entirely new transaction on terms that are fair to the United States, its businesses, its workers, its people, and its taxpayers. So folks, he goes on to say, we're getting out. But we will start to negotiate, and we will see if we can make a deal that's fair to re-enter. And if we can, that's great. And if we can't, that's fine too. So do you understand the importance of what just happened about 20 minutes ago with Donald Trump pulling us out of the Paris Climate Agreement? He's looking at the international community, the world government, and saying, no, not going to be a part of it. That's extremely important to us for many reasons. One, prophetically speaking, we know that in the end time, the United States is not going to be involved in the world government. And so here we are, the president, the leader of the free world, saying in the year 2017, when all the prophecies are converging at the same time, no, we're not going to be a part of it. It's following right along with the prophecies of the Bible. But on a secular standpoint, we've got the President of the United States standing in the face of the international community and saying, no, not going to be a part of it. It's not a good deal for the American people, for the American taxpayer, for the jobs of the American people. It's going to take jobs from America and ship them around the world. And so, no, not going to do that. Are you proud of that? I am. I'm thankful for somebody who will stand in the face, not go downstream, but swim upstream and say, no, not going to happen here in the United States. We've needed that really for years and years and years. And I just saw it in our president today. And man, am I thankful for that? You better believe it. And so I want to go over the Paris Climate Agreement today and show you what it's really all about, because what really happened just before I came on the radio is so significant. And I want to make sure you understand that the Paris Climate Agreement equals world government. And what just happened, our president, President Donald Trump, I'm not ashamed to say that at all, very proud of him today, is that he stood in the face of this world government and said, no, we're not going to do that. He stood in the face of globalization, the international community, everybody, the G7, NATO, our NATO allies, and just said, no, it's not going to happen. And so it's so important prophetically and from a secular standpoint. Because the Paris Climate Agreement was pulling us, it was sucking us into that cobweb of world government. And we do not want to be a part of that in the end time. God's coming back to tear down human government and set up His government here on earth. We do not want the United States part of that. We signed a declaration of independence, not interdependence, independence. We're on our own. That's why in the last 240 years, we've become the richest nation on the face of the earth. Why? Because we signed a declaration of independence. We have free-thinking people who can go out and if they have an American dream, they can go out and it's possible to anybody. And so we're saying that can happen. The world governing, all these people that are trying to establish a world government, they would say, no. You can't manage yourself. We need to manage your life for you. That's what big government does. Big government is all about managing the people. Whereas Donald Trump said today, no, this is not a good deal for the American people. We're pulling out. And I can tell you what, I'm a proud American today. So let's talk about the Paris Climate Agreement. It's very important. A lot of people, and it's not going to go away. Donald Trump just said, we're pulling out of it. We'll negotiate again. If we can get a good deal for the American people, we might get back into it. And if we can't, that's fine too. But as of right now, we pulled out, and man, I'm thankful for that. So the Paris Climate Agreement, with the possibility of President Trump pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, which he just did, many of the world leaders were voicing concern. They were really crying about it, honestly. The Vatican stated that the Pope has strongly and repeatedly backed the landmark global warming deal. The Pope really was pushing for us to stay in the Paris Climate Agreement. That's one of the reasons that it was so significant that Pope Francis gave Donald Trump his encyclical Laudato Si on the climate, because he was saying, hey, do you understand how important the climate is? And in the encyclical, the Pope says the main thing we need to do to curb climate change is to have a world governing body to manage it. I've read the encyclical many times, wrote articles on it. And so that's what he was trying to do. But the Vatican said that they were hoping that Trump would not get out of the global warming deal. Bishop Marcelo Sanchez Serrando, head of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, which has hosted numerous international conferences on climate change, stated that a withdrawal by Trump would not only be a disaster, but completely unscientific. He also suggested that to do so would also be a personal insult to the Pope himself. He stated if he does pull out, it would be a huge slap in the face for us, or the Vatican, and that it will be a disaster for everyone. So you have people all around the world, I'm going to read you a few of them, that have come out, they were yelling, this is unbelievable. It's such an insult for the United States to want to remove themselves from this, because the science is settled. Global warming, which leads to climate change, is heating up the planet, and all of these catastrophic things are going to happen, which really it's all a hoax. But yet they were coming at Donald Trump, trying to pressure him to stay in this Paris Climate Agreement. Why? It's not about the climate, because that's a hoax. The climate has always changed. God's in control of the climate, not mankind. But yet they're trying to establish this world governing body, so they were trying to pressure him to stay in. And that's why I'm so proud that he pulled out of it. Then Nancy Pelosi said that Trump is denying scientific truths, removing safeguards that protect our health and our environment, protecting polluters, and threatening our national and global security. So our national security is based on climate change, that even though it's a hoax, and that the climate is settled? No. And the UN's main Twitter page quotes Secretary General Antonio Guterres as saying, climate change is undeniable. Climate change is unstoppable. Climate solutions provide opportunities that are unmatched. Well, yeah, like opportunities like the Paris Climate Accord to manage the globe or global governance. Of course, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the one world governing body on the United States, in the world, is going to say that. And then that the post from Antonio Guterres includes a video link to an impassioned speech that Guterres gave on Tuesday when he called on the world to intensify action to combat climate change, stating that it would be very important for the U.S. not to leave the Paris Agreement. And so there were a lot of people, the Secretary General of the United States, the head scientist for the Vatican, all of them pressuring Trump, don't pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. And then Elon Musk has said that he will have no choice but to depart Trump's advisory councils if the U.S. pulls out of the climate deal. Well, I guess you're just going to have to not be on the advisory council anymore, Mr. Musk, because we just pulled out. And politicians, world leaders, celebrities, all reacting in a negative manner towards the possibility of Donald Trump pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. You say, well, why are they all coming against him so much like this? Well, world leaders, many celebrities in the Vatican, the United Nations have all bought into the vision of a world government. Now, I didn't say all celebrities. There are conservative celebrities and conservative people on the world stage that haven't bought into this. But most of them, if you're in politics, anywhere in the high up politics, you've sold your soul to this world government. Let's just face it. Not everybody. Like Ron Paul, there were different people that haven't. And it appears that from what we can tell, as of today, Donald Trump isn't one of them. And that's why you wonder why there's such a move on to get Trump out of the office, impeach Trump, get rid of Trump. Because Trump is not conforming to this world government ideology. And so they're going out of their mind. We've got to get Trump off the scene because he's not buying into this. Did you see how everybody was real cooperative with President Obama when he was in there? just like, hey, whatever you want to do, go ahead. Because he conformed to all this, so everything was okay. But when Donald Trump comes along and says, I'm against this world government, I'm against globalization, I want to build a wall, not have open borders and this, that, and the other, we've got to get him out of office as soon as possible. And so consequently, that's what we're looking at. The establishment of a world governing body in the earth today. It's the exact world government the Bible prophesies will be in power just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ and the Battle of Armageddon. And I'm going to say it again. I'm proud of Donald Trump and what he did today and the decision that was made to pull us out of the Paris Agreement. So on today's program, with the time that I have left, I want to discuss the agenda behind the Paris Climate Accord. It's not going to go away. Now, we pulled out of it, and Donald Trump has said that we'll negotiate to get back in if we can make it a better deal for the American people. But there is an agenda behind, it's the green agenda. That you say, well, what's the agenda behind the Paris Climate Accord? I think it's important for you to understand that this is an effort to establish a world government. At the end of the day, it's what it's all about. On socialistic principles, wealth redistribution. In Donald Trump's speech, he mentioned that this is a huge effort to redistribute the wealth from the United States to underdeveloped nations. Even though they haven't worked to earn this, socialism would say, hey, United States, you've got too much. They don't have enough. We need to redistribute your wealth. Now, that's what socialism is. And so once you understand this, about that it's an effort to establish the world government, then it will help you feel the full weight of Donald Trump's decision to keep us in or remove us from, which he's removed us from, the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, if he'd have come and said, I'm going to keep us in the Paris Climate Accord because I think it's good for the American people, we'd have all had to sit here and scratch our heads and go, man, what's Donald Trump thinking here? I mean, he's wanting to keep us in this huge effort towards a world government. But when he come and said, I've got to keep my duty to the American people, I'm pulling us out, I don't know if I can bring forth on the radio how excited I am and really thankful to have a president like that. That's not putting us in that, but he's pulling us out. Thankful for that today. And really, this agreement, this decision to pull us out, it truly is a decision for the United States really to remain. The decision was for the United States to remain part of or withdraw from a world government being established in the earth today. So the climate agreement, which was made within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and representatives from 196 nations made a historic pact on December 12, 2015 in Paris to adopt green energy sources and cut down on climate change emissions and limit the rise of global temperatures while also cooperating to cope with the impact of unavoidable climate change. Well, the climate change is unavoidable. It's about, in Dallas, I don't know, it's about 82, 83 degrees and raining today. Well, it could be 95 and sunny tomorrow. So the climate is going to change every day. I'm 48 years old, and the climate has changed every day since I've been born. So there is unavoidable climate change. I mean, it's going to happen. It always has happened. The earth is heated up, cooled down. It did that before the industrial age ever was dreamed of. You know who's controlling all that? God. God controls the climate. Mankind does not. And so we've got to look at that, because when these world leaders get on there and say, hey, climate change is unavoidable, I totally agree with that. But it's their definition of climate change. It used to be global warming, but they realized that the world's not warming, so they thought, we can't do that anymore. That's impossible to prove. So now we're going to go to climate change. So every little thing that happens, if a polar bear dies, we can blame it on climate change. If we have a problem with national security, it must be climate change. You see what I'm saying? It's simply world government is what it is. So the central goal of the agreement is laid out, really, of the Paris Climate Agreement, is laid out in one phrase. They wanted to hold the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. But Donald Trump said in his speech, even if the Paris Climate Agreement was 100% fully implemented and all the nations on the earth cooperated, it would only change the temperature to 0.2%. So almost nothing. And so the Paris Climate Agreement would really do nothing anyway. It's not really about the climate. It's about efforts towards a world governing body, global governance. That's the goal. And the Paris Climate Agreement was negotiated by representatives of 195 countries at the 21st Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC, or COP21, in Paris, and it was adopted by consensus on December 12, 2015. It was opened for signature on April 22nd, 2016, or Earth Day, at a ceremony at the United Nations, and former Secretary of State John Kerry signed the treaty for the United States that very day. So despite Kerry's signature, the major media usually ignored one significant fact. The U.S. Senate was never given the opportunity to ratify the deal, and which is required by our Constitution. And that means, as far as the United States is concerned, the UN Climate Agreement really is legally meaningless. But see, all they do is promote the agreement, not the legalities behind it. And so legally, we were never bound to it to begin with, because it was called a treaty. And so the Paris Agreement is the first climate deal that really purports to bind all the world's governments, rich and poor, to a commitment to cap global warming, which the United Nations, former President Obama, and a host of climate experts beholden to the environmental lobby allege is caused by the burning of coal, oil, and gas. Folks, listen, I may say this many times today, and you've heard me say it before, but it's a complete hoax. All of this is based upon a hoax, that humans are putting off enough carbon emissions to cause the earth to heat up to the point where we've got climate change catastrophes, and we need to create a global government institutions to manage that, and put all these restrictions on the planet, on the nations, to curb their carbon emissions. And that's what this Paris Climate Agreement is about, world government. We're going to put restrictions on how much carbon emissions you can give off, United States. Even though we signed a Declaration of Independence, they're trying to draw us into that. And that's one of the main reasons I'm proud of Donald Trump pulling us out of that. So with this climate accord, the United Nations really advanced its global governance agenda. That's what it's behind it all. It's not the climate. They really don't care about that. At the end of the day, it's global government. If you understand the history of global governance, they have to come up with a scare tactic. Global leaders, anytime a world government, global empires throughout history, they've had to have scare tactics to keep the people in line. Some of them considered themselves gods, and I may put a plague on you or curse you or this, that, and the other if you don't bow down to my edicts. A lot of them considered the emperors a god, or he was the king, or this, that, and the other. And now they're trying to establish a world government on the earth today. It's prophesied in Scripture that it's going to happen. And one of their scare tactics is global warming, which leads to climate change. If we don't, as the global leaders, manage the rest of the populace, then, hey, global warming, climate change is going to consume the planet. All these horrific, catastrophic events are going to happen because you didn't let us manage you. It's big government getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so now you can kind of see the significance of Donald Trump pulling us out of that. So UN insiders understood the signing of the Paris Agreement was intended to affirm the organization's 2030 agenda for sustainable development. It's a plan to end poverty, fight inequality and injustice, and tackle climate change by 2030. It's a plan that really some critics call a blueprint for global governance. That's exactly what it is. They want to manage every aspect of every human on the earth. And this is just one more effort to do that. So, first let me give you a little history of events leading up to the signing of the accord, because really the stage had to be set for the Paris Accord. Of course, it was 2015, Pope Francis came out with his encyclical on the environment and climate change. That was in June of 2015. Then in September 23 through 25 of that year, Pope Francis gave 3 speeches here in the United States. The first was in front of the President of the United States at the many other distinguished guests at the White House. The second, a lot of you will remember this. The second was at the joint sessions of Congress. And the third was at the United Nations during the Sustainable Development Summit in 2015. And that was held in September of that year. And those who attended or listened to him speak around the world really were at times puzzled by his choice of topics or the lack thereof. Pope Francis is the most recognizable religious figure on the planet. And yet during these appearances, he didn't pray. He didn't present the gospel or call people to a greater faith in Christ. He did, however, in all 3 speeches acknowledge the supposed destruction of the environment caused by what global alarmists have deemed human-induced climate change. So that almost half of his White House speeches were devoted to the environment. And so when we come back from the break, I'll get back into this Paris Climate Accord, and I'm getting to some of the events setting the stage for the signing of that in 2015, because it's important that you realize it's just a humongous effort by the world leaders to establish a world government in the earth. And so I'll get back and explain the rest of it to you in the latter part of the program.
From Here to Armageddon, a new exciting 8-lesson series to share with your friends and family. Order yours right away.
Answering many questions like, how far are we from the Battle of Armageddon? What will happen between now and then? Where are we on the timeline? Your questions answered in this exciting 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon.
Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-END-TIME, 1-800-363-8463. Order yours right away.
Today I have some exciting news to share with you. You can now become a magazine subscriber for life. You will receive first-class benefits that will include a lifetime membership to End Time Magazine, as well as an unlimited access to the digital version of the magazine. You will also receive 20% off of all future orders at endtime.com, well, at least till the rapture happens. Never worry about missing one important issue or forgetting to renew. You can rest assured when something happens in the news pertaining to Bible prophecy, you will be informed with the most recent cutting-edge material available. End Time Magazine has been the forefront of End Time Ministries since the beginning, and we would love to join with you in this first ever opportunity of becoming a magazine subscriber for life. Join today by calling 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or go to endtime.com.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
So I'm setting the stage for the signing of the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015 because I want you to understand how important this was to all the world leaders at that point. I mean, everybody, they had movie stars involved. Everybody was involved in getting all these things signed. The Sustainable Development Goals that year, and it was in September of 2015. And then, of course, the Paris Climate Agreement was signed in December of that year. But there were many events that were pre-planned, obviously, to get everybody prepared for the signing of those two things, the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement in December. So I'm talking about some speeches that the Pope gave earlier to out on the White House lawn, to the joint sessions of Congress, and to the White House, or to the United Nations. I'm going to focus on the United Nations one, because he really didn't talk about prayer and Christianity and this, that, and the other. He mainly focused in his speeches on the climate, the environment. And along with climate change, Pope Francis promoted in his speeches at that time other United Nations global governing platforms, such as sustainable development. He was speaking at the Sustainable Development Conference, and social justice, promoting socialism, as well as praising the United Nations for its international jurisdictional framework. So in his White House speech, which is what I'll focus on, Pope Francis stated this: Mr. President, I find it encouraging that you are proposing an initiative for reducing air pollution. Accepting the urgency, it seems clear to me also that climate change is a problem which can no longer be left to future generations. When it comes to the care of our common home, we are living at a critical moment of history. We still have time to make the changes needed to bring about a sustainable and integral development, for we know these things can change. And he then told Congress that he needed a conversation which includes everyone, since the environmental challenge that we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect us all. And in Laudato Si, the Pope Francis's encyclical, he says, I call for a courageous and responsible effort to redirect our steps and to avert the most serious effects of the environmental deterioration caused by human activity. Well, that's questionable. Finally, while speaking at the United Nations, he said, it must be stated that a true right of the environment does exist, because we human beings are part of the environment. We live in communion with it, and since the environment itself entails ethical limits which human activity must acknowledge and respect, any harm done to the environment, therefore, is harm done to humanity. The adoption, he goes on to state in the speech, the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the World Summit, which opens at that time in September, is an important sign of hope. I am similarly confident that the Paris Conference on Climate Change will secure fundamental and effective agreements. So it was clear from all of the speeches that Pope Francis came to America with a clear agenda to endorse the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals and promote a legally binding global climate agreement at the United Nations Climate Change Conference to be held in Paris, France that year from November 30 to December 11th, that was 2015, or what was the agreement he was promoting? The Paris Climate Agreement, which is what Donald Trump just pulled us out of. So now that you see how the stage was set by all of the world leaders, Pope Francis, celebrities, it was this huge push that year. Then we come to the Paris Climate Agreement. So let me give you some history behind the Paris 2015 Climate Change Accord that was signed a few months later after the Sustainable Development Goals were signed onto. They were signed in September. The Paris Climate Agreement, which the stage had been set the whole year for them to be signed in December of that year, 2015. So in the months really leading up to the historical International Climate Change Conference in Paris in 2015 that year, many man-made climate change proponents had been emphatically advancing their cause and denigrating skeptics so vigorously that it has really taken a tone which borders on a religious fervor. And the climate crowd, so they're called, they got so desperate that if anyone denied their false climate change science, that they wanted to silence them by litigation and possible jail time. If you've read the news, you've heard the term silence the deniers or the silence the climate deniers. Well, nobody denies the climate. They deny the fact that human-induced global warming leads us to climate change, because there's no science behind that. And so that's why they deny that. But these people were so desperate to get their agenda across the finish line that they wanted to put people in jail. So even though they claimed, quote unquote, that the science was settled, and quote unquote, that there is no debate, that at that time, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and a group of 20 professors, they came up with a solution for what to do with those, let's say, pesky skeptics who continue to question the theory of human-caused global climate change. They just said, let's put them in jail. We're going to silence them because we don't want them getting in the way of our agenda. So we're just going to put them in jail. They actually proposed that. And they said that warmers, they were warmers. They wanted the Obama administration to prosecute global warming deniers under the Anti-Mobster Racketeering and Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO, as if skeptics they're members of an organized crime syndicate or something. So in other words, if skeptics can't be persuaded with facts and logic, the man-made global warming advocates propose that the only alternative was to threaten the deniers with criminal prosecution. Now, this all happened right there at the time they wanted to sign this Paris Climate Agreement. So people were coming up and saying, hey, global warming, which leads to climate change, human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, that's not happening. That's a hoax. And I can prove it scientifically. I mean, there were many well-renowned, world-renowned scientists that said this is simply not happening. And what they wanted to do was say, nah, criminal prosecution, let's just put those people in jail. We've got to silence them. That's what they were trying to do because they wanted to get this agenda passed. And also to head off further debate, a leading lawyer at that time called for the International Court of Justice to decide that a man is causing climate change and to be able to prosecute them. The question is, was it really a concern for the climate, or did they really have a true global agenda? It was a global agenda. They were trying to establish a world government. So you say, well, hold on a minute. Why all the pressure and bullying? Well, I think most of you know the answer to that question. That they were trying to, they had an agenda. And if you're got a secular mind, you're a one-worlder, you believe in a one-world government, and somebody comes against that, it's like a mosquito that's flying around your head. So I'm going to pressure them, I'm going to bully them to where they either keep their mouth shut or we got to take them off the scene. And another question, could it be that the compulsion to conform took precedence over scientific debate? That scientists were kind of looking the other way. They knew what the facts were, but they said, you know what, I'm getting funded by this organization, so I probably ought to lay out these spreadsheets that prove what they want. Or was it even more deceptive than that? Could it have been that pushing a globalist political agenda was more important than actually understanding the extent to which human activity influences climate change? These are all questions that need to be asked, and it's obvious that Donald Trump has come to the conclusion today by saying, we're not going to have any part of that. Human-induced climate change, it's a hoax. He's called it a hoax in the past. And so now you understand the full weight of his decision today. All of the world leaders who signed on to this are against him. They can't believe that he pulled out. I mean, go read your news. They're all saying, I can't believe this is happening. Donald Trump, the United States is going to pull out. This is going to be a travesty. All of these horrible things are going to happen. Well, what you're going to find out is nothing horrible to the climate is going to happen. Nothing. Because it's all a hoax. And really up to that point, climate change had been really blamed for, listen at this. They were blaming climate change for receding glaciers, melting the polar ice caps, drowning polar bears, increased hurricane activity, dooming coral reefs, rising sea levels, increasing food shortages, the disappearances of bumblebees and butterflies, mass extinctions, and even threatening our national security. California Governor Jerry Brown dramatically declared at a conference at the Vatican that the world may have reached a tipping point on global warming and that humanity must reverse course or face extinction. He said we have to respond. If we don't, the world's going to suffer, and we will all suffer. In fact, many millions of people are already suffering. But if you look at it, not doing too bad. I mean, there are people that are suffering, but not as a result of global warming and climate change. And so that is where those events brought us up to the Paris Climate Accord. And this is where it came in at the Paris COP21. It was December 2015. So in their mind, to forestall this global climate catastrophe, representatives of the governments of 190 nations gathered at the Conference of the Parties, or COP, to the United Nations Framework Convention on the Climate Change in Paris to discuss the creation of an international agreement to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions and keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change facilitates the creation of international agreements in response to global warming. The Conference of Parties, or COP, is the highest decision-making body of the UNFCCC, hence the 21st meeting of the body in Paris in November. And it was abbreviated COP21. The UNFCCC recognizes anthropogenic or human-induced climate change and challenges the industrialized countries to bear the major responsibility for combating it. So they were picking out China, Russia, the United States, and Europe, and they said, hey, all you guys have to sign on to this because you've got a responsibility for it. Now, people like the underdeveloped countries, Africa and South America and all these places, you need to really transfer some of your wealth to them because they're not putting off near as much carbon emissions. And so they said, you guys have a responsibility to combat this. So the UNFCCC had previously hosted the 2009 Copenhagen Climate Change Conference, and which President Obama called a really disorganized mess. And that conference had failed to pass any binding emissions, but did approve the Copenhagen Accord, a voluntary political agreement. So I'll finish with the Paris Climate Accord when we get back after the break.
Most people have dreamed of someday walking on the ground where Jesus walked over 2,000 years ago. You don't have to wait any longer. Make this the year for your life-changing experience. This is your official invitation to join Judy and me for our 2017 Fall End Time Prophecy Tour. The trip of a lifetime is a severe understatement. If you could travel to any place on earth, your first choice should definitely be the Holy Land. There is simply no other place like it. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 for more information. Ask to speak to Holly or Jana about the tour.
So really, the Copenhagen agreement, it was pretty much a failure. Nothing really happened, and it may have been bad timing for the conference since miraculously a blizzard dumped snow on the Copenhagen leaders who were battling global warming. Now think about that. You go to a global warming conference, all these world leaders are sitting there and it's dumping snow outside. I mean, come on. Wouldn't you think, hey, this may be a sign from God? It's not even supposed to be snowing and it's dumping snow outside. The Copenhagen Conference, however, did take a step closer toward global governance when the content of the failed consensus draft treaty revealed the additional goals of a framework for a new world government. Lord Christopher Monckton, who was a former science advisor to the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, he characterized the draft 2009 Copenhagen Treaty, the one which failed to pass, as a global government, a global wealth redistribution and global enforcement, all without any democratic process whatsoever. So prior to the Paris Accord, on August 2nd, 2015, the 193 member states of the United Nations agreed on 17 new sustainable goals designed to end poverty. And they were to promote prosperity and people's well-being while protecting the environment by 2030. That all sounds great, doesn't it? Until you realize there's a world government that's going to lord over you to get all that stuff passed. And these goals were on the schedule to be fairly adopted by the Sustainable Development Summit at the UN in September of that year. So, according to the United Nations Sustainable Development 2015 website, these new goals were broader than the 2000 Millennium Development Goals, which expired at the end of 2015. In fact, the actual title of the 29-page text begins with the phrase, transforming our world. It had been agreed upon that the new goals would be the global in nature and universally applicable to all. President Obama stated that he was cautiously optimistic that leaders would finally reach a formal agreement. However, the new universal agenda, which the Paris Climate Agreement helps to implement, so you can understand the agreements of the importance of this Paris Climate Agreement. Without the United States being involved in that, the Sustainable Development Goals can't be fully implemented. You understand the importance of what just happened before I come on the radio program today. So the new Universal Agenda, which was adopted, turned out to be a true blueprint for global governance. Michael Schneider noted that within the body of the first paragraph of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the United Nations plans were to launch a new universal agenda for humanity, global governance. Snyder claimed that the 2030 Agenda is truly a blueprint for global governance, which encompasses virtually all areas of human activity. The amount of electricity you use, production, consumption, every aspect of your life. They want to control that. And the ultimate outcome really of this sustainability agenda is a massive transformation of social, political, technological, cultural, and behavioral processes that impact how mankind produces and consumes. In other words, sustainability affects every aspect of life on earth. Green initiatives attempt to modify human behavior to reward us for how we eat, work, travel, play more sustainably. But sustainable development, what is that? Sustainable development really is a catchphrase used by activists and government agencies involved in the implementation of Agenda 21, which, according to the UN's own website, is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally, not just on a global level, but all the way down in your local town you live in, by organizations of the United Nations system, governments and major groups in every area which humans impact the environment. Every area. The ultimate goal of Agenda 21 is the control by the United Nations and a future one world government of all human settlements, determining where you can live, what land should be used for. I mean, every aspect of your life. They want to control that. And everybody, I've got to tell you, all of this, these major moves, these efforts towards this world governing body, I'm talking about on a world level. This is not Wiley, Texas. This is not, I'm talking about on these people are supposedly supposed to be some of the smartest minds on earth. But all of this is based on a hoax. You say, well, how are they getting by with it? Because they put people in fear mode. If they can get you scared enough to where you think the earth's going to burn up or all of these things, the human existence is going to expire, then they can say, well, we've got to do this because if we don't, then you're not going to be able to eat by the year 2030, or all of the polar bears are going to die, and all of this is some of the things, that the oceans are going to rise to the point where it would come all the way into Indiana, stuff like that. Well, people get scared out of their mind and they think, well, hey, in the name of security, do whatever you want to. Pass all the laws you want. And that's how we move off into a world governing body. They get everybody into fear mode. So what they've done is they've come up with this hoax that says, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, what you need to do is you need to cut back on your electricity a little bit, cut back on your consumption of food, curb this, and they start to put you in this little box because it's world government. We're looking at sustainable. You need to ride more bikes, drive less cars. And that's why you see all these bike trails and, all over Dallas. People can use a whole lane to ride a bike in. Why are they doing all that stuff? They're becoming more sustainable. They want more people riding bikes and less people driving cars. They want these mass transit trains rather than everybody driving their car to work. But this whole thing, the Paris Climate Agreement, the entire Paris Climate Agreement was based on a hoax. The whole thing was designed to keep the global temperature to drop it below a 2% increase in temperature, and so that the earth doesn't heat up because humans are putting off too many carbon emissions and therefore going to burn up the planet. These just unbelievable environmental catastrophes. Because of what we are doing, there's more tornadoes and hurricanes and earthquakes and all this other mess. It's all based on a hoax, everyone. It's easily proven. But my question to you, because you're going to get this, they're going to try to cram it down your throat. Especially, watch what they're doing. Watch what they do this afternoon, tonight, tomorrow, over the next few days, because Donald Trump pulled us out. They'll try to demonize him for that and taking a stand, and because we have an establishment here in the United States that totally agrees with world government. And so that's why they will criticize Trump. They will try to demonize him for standing in the face. It's when he got elected, when he started talking about putting a wall up. Look at everybody that made fun of him and, we can't build walls and all this other stuff. And because what he was trying to do was protect the United States. If you can't protect your borders, you really have no more nation at that point. And so he stood up and said, I'm going to build a wall. And all of these people who believe in a world government and believe in open borders and all this other stuff, they started making him out to try to make him look like a fool. But at the end of the day, this is exactly what we should be doing. You don't have a nation if you don't have a wall. Okay, so I'm not talking about the wall today, but I'm just saying Donald Trump's taking a stand. And he's saying, no, I'm not going to go into this world government stuff. I'm going to protect the American people. It's America first. And they don't like that. They want to do away with the nation state. And everybody pledge allegiance to this world governing body. It's where it's all headed. And they do not like the fact when somebody will stand up and say, I'm not going to play ball with you guys. And watch the news over the next couple days. They'll be screaming and trying to demonize Trump every way that they can because he's not conforming to the world governing body, and they do not like it. So my question is, you read the news, do you believe in man-made global warming, in that consensus? Have you bought into that? I know I've talked to some college kids and they're getting this stuff crammed down their throat. The global warming which leads to climate change. There are world-renowned scientists that say that's a hoax. All of this is a hoax. Now, they've tried to shut them down, but there's quotes everywhere that said this is just simply not happening. But yet they ignore them and say, well, the United Nations science panel that they put together, that we're going to go with what they say. Instead of these world-renowned scientists that say it's a hoax. So let me explain the consensus, because I want to make sure that you know this is a hoax. The impact mankind has had on the temperature trends of the planet is known as anthropogenic, or human cause, the cause of climate change. When somebody says anthropogenic, it means human-induced, the cause of climate change. The view that man's combustion of fossil fuels, you've heard about all this fossil fuel industry, the coal plants and different things, that the carbon emissions from them significantly warm the Earth's atmosphere, and it's called the enhanced greenhouse effect. The anthropogenic or man-made global warming theory has been defined as the idea that the Earth naturally keeps a stable atmospheric temperature over time, and that human activity, primarily in the form of CO2 emissions from industrial activity, is primarily responsible for the unhealthy warming of the Earth's atmosphere. That's simply not the case. Supporters of this man-made climate change theory frequently assert the existence of a scientific consensus, quote unquote, favoring their viewpoint. The science of global warming, they say, is settled. However, web author Enzi Ferrari does not believe in this scientific consensus, that it's a method of acquiring knowledge. She believes that in particular we should be wary of people who defend the theory of catastrophic man-made global warming by saying that the science on the matter is settled. The science is never settled. She states that no science is ever settled. Science thrives on debate, controversy, and is not a democratic process. Scientific disputes and disagreements cannot be resolved by any polls among scientists. There's another good reason to not depend on scientific consensus about climate change. In many instances, there really is no consensus. So you can see that at the end of the day, if we peeled away all the layers of the onion from the Pope's encyclical that he put out in June of 2015, to the Sustainable Development Goals that were signed on to by the Obama administration and all the other nations of the world in September of 2015, to the Paris Climate Agreement that was finally signed on to by the nations of the world in December of 2015, there was an agenda that they're pushing, and it's world government. The same world government prophesied to be in power just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now you know the importance of the decision that Donald Trump made just before I came on the program. If you didn't get to hear the speech, go watch it, go read it. Such an important speech, pulling us out of the Paris Climate Agreement and saying to the international community, no, in essence, we signed a declaration of independence, not interdependence on a world governing body.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.